So now we're going to get into and talk about probate auctions. Um, Kind of interesting. We're going to start looking more into them. We're going to start adding any probate auction list to our auction calendar there on the website, because we are interested in any way that we can acquire property for below market value. So, I think that we're coming into an opportunity where tax sale investors can make a lot of money, but there's other strategies that we can implement. It's why we've been talking about, it's why we're talking about probate sales. It's why we've been talking about bank sales or REOs lately, is we're looking at any way that we can make money through an auction or through kind of an over the counter. Something like an REO is really kind of an over the counter to a degree because it was already offered at the auction.
Yeah, well, real estate is the investment, but tax sales are just a finding method or a buying method, that you could look at. But there's lots of other buying methods. What interests us about tax sales is the fact that you don't always have another party that's contending or trying to get a certain amount out of the property. But there are other situations where that same thing, is true, where you don't always have the emotional seller, at the other end, trying to get everything they can out of the property. Or you can have more potential profitability in it because you're going through a buying method that maybe most people haven't done.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and they all offer discounted real estate. And that's really how real estate investors, whether it be tax sale investing or any of the other strategies that we talk about, you know, these are ways that we can pick up property for cheap. So as far as a probate sale or how it occurs, this is when real estate is sold from the estate of somebody who's passed away. So there's going to be court that oversees part of that transaction, or in some cases, a lot of that transaction, depending on how the state operates.
Yeah. So why probate properties? First off, estates need to liquidate assets quickly, and heirs want distribution proceeds fairly quickly. And so the idea behind it is how can we sell properties the quickest and still get the best money we can out of it? Because see, the faster you're trying to push this through, the lower the price you're probably going to get out of it. And so, a 10 to 35% below market value is what they may end up selling for through the probate sale, but that is enough to make everybody that's involved happy. The heirs, everybody, all the distribution is done, and everybody gets what they want in a time period that's fast enough for them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Now, some things to remember is that these are going to be as-is sales. Now, as tax sale investors, as bank auction investors, we already understand that, so that's not something that it's going to be a shock to us. We understand kind of what these type of properties are. Now, the court is going to and can add, issues with it. It's kind of going to depend on how the state is operated, and we'll talk about that a little bit here, a little bit more in a minute. But sometimes it can be fairly quick in certain type of states, but it can be as much as 16 or 18 months in some cases. So they may be going through a long process before it even gets to an auction. Now, who's going to be involved with it? First of all, is going to be the seller, the administrator. There's also going to be some type of probate court involved with it as well. And then, of course, the heirs as well, anyone who's going to benefit from the sale, and also a probate attorney that is handling it for the executor, for the family in that probate court.
Yeah, yeah. So essentially, anything that is going to happen does have to be approved by a judge or administrator or executor, essentially, or going to be the ones that essentially kind of control that aspect here of it. That's definitely a point. In fact, I think we've got a few people here that may even have worked. They may work in the probate industry here. I'm thinking here, at least Rosa might. I'm thinking here as I'm looking at the comments. So we'll have to keep an eye out here. She might have some good comments here for us. Now, there are two types of probate sales, and the type of authority that's granted to the estate representative is really what determines what the experience is like in terms of, I guess, what it's like if you're buying from a probate sale here. There are those that have limited authority here that are court confirmed, and then there's full authority where essentially it's all handled here, I think, through the court.
Yeah, exactly. So when we're talking about the limited authority, these are going to be a court supervises the entire sale. They're, like Shade said, they're going to need a confirmation. They're going to have to need an appraisal done as well. There can be overbidding at the hearing or the auction. So in some cases, you could put your offer in and it could go to the auction and can get outbid. So it's a little bit higher risk, but we also have a better opportunity to purchase them for cheaper. With full authority, then they're not going to need a confirmation hearing. They only have a 15-day period, and you can deal directly with the administrator who's handling the sale. So a little bit, it's kind of like a an over the counter in a way, where because of the law structure there, it's easier for them to go ahead and sell it. They may list it with an agent. You may be working directly with their attorney that's selling it for the family. And these are ones that are going to happen a lot quicker.
Oh yeah, and actually that kind of makes sense here. That would be a little bit easier experience in some ways. Where you're able to negotiate directly with representatives here, 3 to 4 months in time here. Lower risk, faster, more predictable. That makes sense versus doing everything there, through the limited authority. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, in a way, you think the full authority would be going through the court, but they've kind of got that flip, back and forth. Now, as far as how to be able to find these properties, sometimes they can be listed through the MLS. There's probate attorneys that kind of specialize in this, and may have properties that is in their regular inventory that they're going through that process to be able to sell it. There's also estate company sales that'll go ahead and handle probate auctions.
Yeah, yeah. You can also, so you can find them through courthouse records. Legal publications will also have probate stuff still listed as well. And online auction platforms as well are kind of growing in popularity here and are new ways that you can find properties like this. Essentially, though, what really changes about a probate deal is who you're going to be bargaining with here. Who you're basically negotiating, talking with, working through, who you can get the property through. And some of the things are going to be different about the deal, but it seems like for the most part, though, there is room to negotiate here, at least to a degree, on properties. I don't know how, I wouldn't say that there's too many downsides there, at least to buying here that I've seen so far. And if you can get a good deal at the end of the day, that's really what we're after. So this is something where I've never bought a probate property before. I'd be kind of interested to look into these more for more deals like these because we know they come up on a pretty regular basis. In fact, we kind of deal with them to a degree on a regular basis with tax sales, because oftentimes we have people that are passing away and things that are going into probate.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, and like Shade said, this is something that we're going to be looking into. We're going to be adding more of these type of lists and auctions to our auction calendar because we're interested in any way that we can make money. And maybe you're not going to get as big a discount on this type of strategy, but there's also going to be more financing options for you as well. So if we're looking to do it with limited money or use other people's money, use something like a private lender, there's more opportunity with that. Now, one thing to remember is this is going to be an as-is type property, so the estate isn't going to repair anything. You can go through many times and get an inspection done, but they're not going to make any concessions or anything like that. It is kind of, this is what they'll accept and you're buying it as is. So it's not their job to improve anything. You're not going to get any of those kind of concessions, when buying these type of properties.
Yeah, you're not dealing with a lender, that is that's trying to minimize, their losses here on a deal here. There's not going to be as much for them to work with really because it's not that kind of a deal. You basically have the administrator of the estate with what the requirements are, and they're not going to be able to move outside of those. And so, um, yeah, property may have deferred maintenance spanning years or decades. That's something we see with tax up properties sometimes. They say deferred maintenance. What that really means is it hasn't been taken care of for a long time. That's something we have to watch out for because we know it doesn't take that long here with properties sitting vacant for things to get crazy with them. And so it's also possible that they could have code violations going on, environmental hazards, structural issues. The longer a property sits vacant like that, the more problems can pop up. And so, as is really, if you're buying as is, it's worth it to do a little bit of extra research, like sending somebody out there to get current photos of it, or having somebody go by to do an actual inspection of the property before you commit to anything.
Yeah, well, and many times they're going to have title searches done. that you can actually get on it. In fact, I think when we look at some properties here in a minute, I think that some of them actually had title inspections that you could kind of go through. So we are buying it as is. They're not going to make any repairs, but they're going to need to get an appraisal done on the property, at least with one type of sale, and then we can send over an inspector so we can determine exactly what our costs are going to be before getting an offer, or sending an offer, or bidding at the auction. With that additional information, we can make a lot better, more informed decisions. So, we don't mind paying more for a property, if we know more information about it, because then we can better factor in what our profit margins are going to be, because we have more knowledge on what the condition is.
One other thing too is when we are factoring out all the different issues that are going on with the property like that, we have to calculate that into our offer, because it's not a situation where we can do a back and forth here with an administrator and say, oh well, we're gonna heckle on this. Basically we have to account for anything that the property needs to have done, and it just needs to be a part of the offer, and they're either going to accept it or they aren't, or probably not going to get, like they were saying, it's not like buying it from a bank or from some kind of a lender or something like that, like a bank foreclosure. It's going to be important though that you still know about all those defects and that you can account for those in the offer amount, because that the fact that they're trying to get X amount of money may not account for all these things that are going on or maybe wrong with the property. In other words, just because they're trying to get a certain amount out of the property doesn't mean that that's a good price, or that there aren't additional issues or problems with the property. Those are things that you would need to be able to find and account for, if you're going to submit an offer, there to them. Maybe you can get them, maybe you could get them to go back and maybe change pricing. Possibly, I don't know. If you could find a big enough problem, maybe you could. But for the most part, though, it just has to be part of what your general math is going to be for the deal. Like for instance, property taxes, you have to kind of include, if there's 2 years worth of back owed property taxes, you kind of have to include that in your offer.
Yeah, well, and one thing that they're going to do is they're going to have an appraisal done. So at least in many of these sales, they're going to have somebody go through, especially if it's kind of that one that goes through the court. They're going to have an appraisal done, and they'll need to accept something off of that. So usually it's between 90% to as low as 65%, kind of between 10 to 35% profit margin in there, or lower what the appraised value is, maybe up to 40% if the home needs a lot of work. So one of the biggest advantages of these is obviously if you have cash, that's a great way to be able to do it. You can get your offer in quickly. But there's also a lot of other ways we can do this. We can do this with private money. We can do it with hard money. We could do it with a HELOC. And so there's many different ways that we can finance this if we don't have the capital to be able to do it ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, having the cash available to you right then is how you're going to be able to win auctions the best. I mean, if you don't have to account for, how you're going to fund these deals, it makes it quite a bit easier there if you just know you have the capital there, and so you can just get your offers in. Um, but yeah, you can do it a lot of other ways though. You can use private money, you can use hard money, you can use a lender here if you want. You can use a HELOC. There's a lot of different financing strategies here for uh, getting these kinds of properties.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, as we go in to the future, we're going to be looking a lot more into some of these other strategies, and we're going to go through and figure out, how this works, and be able to create a program within our membership on probate sales, and be able to document that, because we want to bring you all of the strategies, or the best strategies for you to be able to make money in real estate, whether that's using your own money in the case of tax sales, or bidding it at an auction, or using other people's money. Here's kind of a sample valuation. So let's say a property was worth 500,000, we decided to add an as-is discount of 25%. So usually we're looking at between 15 to 35% below what we think the comparable value is. So in this case, I've documented 125,000. Then we have the inspection done, and we know that there needs to be about $40,000 worth in repairs. Kind of like that house, that last house that we were looking at, where we could see they added some carpet and paint. That's kind of, let's say it was a property like that. We go ahead and account 40,000 repair. Then we're going to give ourselves 9 months worth of carrying cost. for additional 9,000. 3,000 in title and attorney fees, and $35,000 over what our high bid would be. Meaning that if this property did go to the auction, we'd already submitted our offer, then somebody at the auction, even though they've kind of said, okay, we'll accept your offer depending on, if it sells it there at the auction. Let's say somebody decides to outbid us. We want to give ourselves a cushion of 35,000. So our max offer amount on this property would be about 288,000.
Yeah, which, again, all that stuff basically subtracts off of, the property's value there at 500,000. So with this particular property, we'd be getting it for about 50 to 60% of value. If they accepted the offer, and we can kind of see where we would have profitability kind of built into it. There's profitability just in the as is discount, but there's also profitability built into it for things like the overbid cushion there, and other things, repairs and whatnot that may need to be done.
Yeah. So I mean, there's still good profit margins within there to make $100,000 to $150,000, and that would kind of be, really that house that we were looking at last would be a good example of it was a probate sale. The difference is we could send over an inspector to view the entire inside before the auction, or before the offer's accepted. So as far as some tips, it's good to build a relationship with an attorney, and this is really something that you could do all across the country, but it's probably a strategy that we should at least look at within our own area, where we can create an attorney. Or if you're investing in an area, let's say you're doing tax sales in an area, you've already got a real estate attorney, that could be a good place that you could look at as well. Now, like with any type of auction, cash is going to be the easiest way to be able to do that, the most efficient, especially if we're looking at auctions. But there is other strategies that we can use with using something like other people's money.
What's really interesting about it is that it's its own niche market in a lot of ways, because local attorneys are going to know, like, when certain estates are filing, and when sales are happening. It probably helps to have somebody that kind of has their finger on the pulse of of the probate market there and is following different sales. Otherwise, it'd be pretty easy to miss a lot of good opportunities that come along, especially if you're trying to get properties within a specific area. You should definitely figure out or get some kind of finger into what's going on here with the probate market and the REO market. Some of these other buying methods, for finding deals. Especially if you're trying to get properties in a certain market, you've got to utilize more than one usually in order to start getting properties at prices you want there.
Yeah, well, and what we want to expose our members to and our students is different strategies, because one thing about tax sales is it's going to be location based to a degree. And what I mean by that is you aren't always going to be able to buy tax sale properties in your state. If you live in Arizona, they're a tax lien state. There's not a chance you can buy your home or a property to live in or investments within Phoenix if you live within that state. It's just not going to happen through a tax sale. But we can look at bank foreclosures. We can look at probate sales. We can look at REO opportunities. And these are all ways that we can pick up properties for between 60 to 70% on the low end, upwards of 80%, where there's good profit margins, where there's good opportunity. Plus, we know a lot more information than we can with a tax sale property, because we can do things like inspections.
And where it says walk away without emotion, 55% of Americans die without wills, and that is what drives the probate market, is individuals dying without wills. And as long as that happens, there's always going to be more probate deals coming, more probate sales happening. And so that's one thing just to think about and consider, is that it's about half of the people out there that end up passing away. And if they have options, that if they have things they own like that, they're going to end up going through probate.
Yeah, exactly. There'll be some attorney that takes over it. They're in charge of selling those assets, and they want to get as much money as they can, but they still need to sell the property. They realize that they're selling them as is.
Yeah. So let's go and take a look at a few probate sales here. And why don't we do this?
Should just be that one link.
Where at?
underneath the tip of the week on the podcast slides. You see on the podcast notes, there's post-sale, pre-sale, tip of the week.
Oh, sorry. I was looking on the slides. There we go. Okay, so here we have probate properties here for sale.
Got the agent right there. Yeah.
And yeah, there's like 4 properties here in the Los Angeles area, a couple of condos, a multifamily in Long Beach, and a mobile home in Silmar.
Yeah. So, these are just being handled through some type of attorney. They've got an agent who's in charge of them. I think you have to do a $10,000 deposit to bid on the property.
Yeah.
June 7th on this one. Looks like I think, is it a commercial condo or is it residential?
Actually, is it resident? I think it's residential.
It says it's renowned architect. Somebody.
Yeah, it must be. 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,100 square feet. This home needs to be remodeled and be a great opportunity for a buyer looking to make it their own. Rare top floor corner unit. 1960s architectural building design, and has 15-unit community there. Features an elevator. It's $675 a month in HOA fees. Oof, that's a lot.
Yeah, does it have an address there?
Let's see. I think I did see.
Yeah, I thought I said maybe it's on the other page or below.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Unit 301 here in West Hollywood.
Kind of interesting to see what it's valued at.
All right, so that is going to be our spot there, which is going to be number 301. So let's pull up on Redfin here.
That's kind of interesting. Not pulling it up.
This looks like the building, though.
Yeah.
So this one right here kind of looks like the same building. And let's see, so the address that we were looking at here was 1550, and this address is listed as.
They have Laurel there, 1539.
Yeah, this one's 1539 Laurel, number 101. And this one is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, just like the property we're looking at. So the one we were looking at here was 1,103 square feet. It's unit number 301.
What happens when you click on the view on the map? Does it pull up the same thing? That kind of looks like a different location. It's just Laurel Avenue.
I think it's the same thing.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. It's basically showing you we've got 1550 on this one versus 1550 on both of them there. There's just apartment 301 we can see is this building right here.
One of them looked like it was Laurel Avenue. One looked like it was Laurel Canyon Avenue.
You know what? Let's see if we can get it to do. Right after Avenue, let's see if we can find 301. And there we go. And there we go. So 559 is the value here on the property. And one thing that's nice is we do have images. So in fact, these may not even be that old because they were saying it needed to be remodeled. And
yeah, well, no, this is probably the listing agent. They probably are working with an agent, even if it's going up for the auction, and you can submit offers. That's kind of their asking price. And they accept the highest offer, and they can accept the highest offer, but depending on the way the law is, then it might go to the auction. or it could just be accepted through the agent. Depends on the state. You really got to check the state, because that's going to make a big difference on how the probate sales are done within your area.
Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, so you basically come up with an offer against that. That's their asking price. You can submit an offer here for less, and the person with the highest offer is going to win it here on that auction date. I
Well,
guess
it
they're going to
was,
sell it by auction essentially, right?
and that's their asking price. We saw a similar property, in the building next to it, because it looks like there's multiple buildings there that they were asking $1 million for it, or they valued it at $1 million. So they're probably asking already under market value. We'd need to check more into it.
Yeah.
That's just right next door to it, because there's like 4 buildings kind of right there all in a row.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, the value did look like, let's try looking up 302 here. I mean, there's 302 valued at 887, that's been remodeled. And it's actually smaller. This one's 900, this one's like 200 square feet smaller than the one that, that we're looking at. So it is probably $1 million property there when it's all fixed up.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, let me back up here. That was just the first property that we saw here. There's a second one here that was a condo also, about 1,168 square feet. And this one's unit 316. This one's a 1-bedroom, 2-bath.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are like 4-level places, it looks like, unless they have underground parking or something here with them. Oh, actually 5625, you can see it's that building right there.
Yeah. I'll bet they have parking in the rear.
Yeah, I'll bet they do too. And let's see what we're looking at here. Is it 316?
But I definitely think this is a strategy that we can implement within our own area. Maybe not every area is going to be the best for it, but it's something to definitely look into.
Yeah, there's 289 here, and yeah, we could figure out. Let's see, what do they say about this property here?
You can even see on the Redfin ad, it said it was a probate sale.
Yeah, yeah, they do
It's going
tell
to be
us it's a
offered at the
probate sale.
property site. They're going to sell it right there at the property. That's
Yeah,
kind of interesting.
yeah, all bidders must have in their possession a cashier's check for $10,000 and a blank personal check for the balance of the required 10% deposit and proof of funds. The one thing I'm kind of interested in here is what the other units here that are selling this place sell for. So there's one for 505 that is 785. That's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath.
And it's possible that I'm not sure if they're going to do it the auction where you might be able to submit more than you know, I think that's kind of where the overbid might come in, is if they get an accepted offer.
Yeah, I mean, look at, so this place sold back in 2015 for 445. This is smaller by maybe a 100 square feet or so. And, but it's also a 2-bedroom. Actually, the one we were looking at was 1-bedroom. That's right. So maybe that was actually bigger. But you see the values are all over the place, for these properties. And we saw the first one we looked at said 300,000, and then we look at this one and it's double that amount. So there is quite a bit. Probably a lot of it's going to come down to how, I guess after repair value is kind of what we're looking at. Some of these properties, whether they need work on them or whether work has been done.
Yeah, the value that they were putting on the 278 or whatever, that's the listing price, essentially at the auction, or if they get offers submitted beforehand there. We've got to look more into the state, but I think that they put it to the auction, and so it's possible that it could go above that, or if there's no bidders, then they may have an accepted offer lower than that. but that was there's still almost $200 worth of potential profit in that deal based on what the market value is.
Interesting.
But hopefully that gives you guys kind of an idea of some of these different probate sales and the opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, I've got another property right there.
And if they do get sold at the sales price that they have listed, then really, even at that price, there could still be good profit margins within them where you could make 100 or more, $1,000 on these deals.
Oh, interesting. Oh, you can see here's one that's subject to court confirmation.
Yeah.
And this one doesn't look like it is. Yeah, very interesting. I'd be interested to learn more about these here and keep an eye out for more of the deals that come up here in different sales. I mean, they look like pretty good opportunities.